Sadine Brown. I'm Director of Community Relations for the Community Preservation Department. CPA was on the ballot question, was passed in 2016. 74% of Boston residents voted for CPA, and it is a 1% surcharge on property tax, and that generates approximately $18 million to the city of Boston. And then there's a state match, and that state match has recently increased. So the pool of money used to be $20 million, and now it's up to $25 million. So $25 million is generated every year from the property surcharge on the property tax and with the state match. And we think that might go up to $30 million in the next 2 years because the state might increase that match. And the state match comes from fees from the Registry of Deeds, and those fees that they collect go into a CPA trust fund. And every city and town that have voted for CPA get distributed this amount from the state to match their surcharge. And so the money can only be used in 3 areas. It can only be used to create affordable housing, for parks and open spaces, and to preserve historical buildings. So far, the CPA, then the way that works is we only fund capital projects, and anyone can really apply. Nonprofits, for-profits can apply for CPA funding. You would complete an application, and the way that works is you submit an eligibility form. Our staff will review the eligibility form and then let you know if you can move on to an application. After you complete after we narrow down the applications, they then go before a 9-member committee. This is called the Community Preservation Committee. There are 9 individuals. 5 are appointed by the mayor. They sit on boards and commissions, and 4 are at-large members that were voted in by the city council. These 9-member committee review the applications. They present the slate of projects to the mayor and the city council, and the mayor then passes them on to the city council. The city council has the final vote on these projects. So far we've had 2 funding rounds, and so last year we gave away $8 million in our pilot funding round in the spring. And then last fall, we gave away $34 million, and we funded 56 projects. $18 million went to affordable housing projects, $8 million to parks and open spaces, and $8 million to historical preservation. And I just want to make it clear, when we say affordable housing, we're supporting any projects. We buy down the affordability in projects. So for certain developments that are being built, we buy down the area medium income. So if it was at 100% AMI, we can give $1 million toward that housing projects to bring that AMI level down to 70% AMI, 60% AMI. We also funded a home ownership program. We funded $3.8 million to the Massachusetts Affordable Housing Alliance and Greater Boston Interfaith Agency, and they're starting they're starting a program that will be run by the Boston Home Center for a 30-year mortgage, and they will also give first-time home buyers up to $50,000 in down payment assistance. So that is how we're helping with affordable housing. We've also funded a lot of open space projects. We funded the Parks Department on certain parks projects that are not on their capital budget. So what we do is projects that are in really great need and they're not going to get to, they have applied for CPA funds, and we were able to support some of those projects. We also have supported neighborhood groups who have created park projects. There was a group in Dorchester, Lena Park. They had a parcel of land that was between a tire shop and an apartment building, and they had residents that had home daycares, but with small children, and they couldn't get across to Franklin Field. So they wanted to create a park space on this parcel of land that they owned. So we were able to give them $600,000 to now create this park space. They worked with pro bono landscape architects, and so in the next couple of years they'll have a park designed and built. And so that's pretty much an overview of what CPA dollars do. So I stated that we did have a funding round last fall. We received a total of 135 eligibility forms, and out of those eligibility forms that we received, the staff reviewed and found that 85 of those were eligible to move on to a CPA application. And out of those 85 applications, the committee funded 56 projects. So that's just an overview, but I'll open the floor now to questions because I know it's a lot of information. But I did have this sheet that kind of goes through all that I just kind of talked about in more detail, and the process and the way things work. And and I want to also refer to historical buildings. So a lot of historical buildings, they have to be on the state and national register to be considered for CPA funding. And even if you're not, we do have a process that you can go through to go before the Boston Landmarks Commission, depending on how old your building is. There is a process and a form that we can have you fill out in order for you to qualify for CPA funds. Any questions? I know it's a lot of information.
Two questions. One is, when does the money have to be used? Is there a time frame within which the money has to be used?
Yeah, so we usually give you 18 months to do it. We know some projects take a lot longer. So housing projects are usually done through the Department of Neighborhood Development. And so they actually are going to manage those CPA funds. Housing projects take a few years, so those will take a little longer. But for open space and historical preservation projects, we do give them an 18-month timeline. If it is going to be a little bit longer, we do ask the applicant to report that into us. And also I want to mention for historical buildings, when it comes to churches, we only can provide funding for the exterior parts of churches. So we can only do the roof, repointing, the steeples. We can't do any work inside of churches because of the law separation of church and state. And so we just focus on the exterior and making, if they want to do ADA accessibility, those are the type of things that we're.
I asked the question because I was curious as
Yeah.
to when the KFC will be using the funds. I hadn't seen any work there yet. But anyway, the other question is, do you know the percentage of funds that went into each of those three categories among those 56 projects?
Yeah, so by law, 10% has to go into each bucket. So far, I actually don't have the numbers in front of me, but a bulk of the money has gone to affordable housing, but we have met the criteria of 10% for each category.
Minimum 10%.
Yes, 10% is required by CPA law. So for every year, 10% has to go into each bucket, and then the committee can decide however else they want to use the funds. But by CPA law, they have to do 10% in each category each year.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And what project did you say you haven't seen started yet?
The KFC building, I don't know if anyone's seen it.
Knights of Columbus? Oh, okay, yeah. So that housing development project, it might be on its way to get starting soon.
And can they use the funds for design as well as construction?
Well, for our CPA funds is only to build the units. And so they have to have that line item showing how our funds is being used to buy down the affordability. They did get other funding sources, so they did get funds from the Neighborhood Housing Trust and from the Department of Neighborhood Development. So they got 3 funding sources for that building. I think we gave them $1.9 million, which is only just a little bit of money to build a development that what they're trying to build. Yeah. You're welcome.
Do the grants cover signage for example, one of the city's Freedom Trail sites, like for example, the burying ground?
So if the signage, if it's historical and it has, as a part of a historical component, it can be considered for CPA funds. And we can do signage too if it's a part of a creation of a park space. So that's where we can cover signage, and if it has historical features, but not just any ordinary sign.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Public money to churches.
Anybody else?
Challenged.
Well, thank you very much for
You're
coming.
welcome. Thank you.